Okay, this screencast is going to introduce Chapter 11. We're going to start by talking about the changing American market with trade. There is a big increase with trading in the years that follow the War of 1812, since the British are no longer interfering with America's free trade. Recall that Federalists like Hamilton wanted to see a shift in the American economy to a more global economy market where they could compete on an international level with the help of policies such as tariffs. The Federalist Party does die, but Hamilton does get his way overall. Much of his vision will eventually come true for the American economy. We've already talked about that kind of continuing with the new party, the Whigs, American system, focusing on a lot of economic reform that even Hamilton wanted. So now to just address the market revolution. The market revolution refers to the shift in America's economy brought on by people buying and selling goods rather than making them themselves. So rather than relying on making things at home and all from scratch, there is more of a movement to buy and sell things. This will yield cash opportunities for sellers who create larger quantities of goods than they used to. So we're seeing also the volume of things being purchased grow. Wait for the bell. Okay, in a market economy, the supply and demand influence the production, distribution, price, and the consumption of goods. That's just a little review for, what a market, capitalist economy is. The market system intensified economic competition. It changed business and labor patterns, and it has a pretty big effect on the lives of everyone living in the U.S. Most business at the time is obviously conducted face-to-face, very different than what it's done, how it's done now. And then as incomes rose because of the greater volume of buying and selling, the U.S. economy grew larger than it had ever been before. And that whole kind of transition to market economy is what the market revolution is. So now we're going to transition to industry. By this point in history, the Industrial Revolution has begun. The Industrial Revolution is the rapid expansion of industry, which included the introduction of machinery and faster ways of mass producing items. The Industrial Revolution is an event that actually started in Great Britain, but it will eventually make its way to the United States. And when it makes its way to the U.S., it will take roots in the Northeast and Midwestern regions instead of the South. Consider the fact that, agriculture is still the predominant economic focus of the South, and, agriculture is not as profitable in the Northeast. So New Englanders are more readily available and excited about the opportunities that industrialization and the revolution would bring. So they are more ready to embrace new forms of manufacturing and profit. Key inventions that are going to help make this kind of economic transition, industrialization, and mass production easier. One big invention that's important is the steamboat. Steamboats invented by Robert Fulton. It made it faster for ships to travel from the north carrying manufactured items for sale. We're also going to see railroads start to develop in the mid-1800s that will allow also for industrial expansion. And also transportation developments also help facilitate communication, just because things can travel faster, including, information. That will help, businesses create larger national markets, just the ability to get things to places faster. You have more modern mail service carriers, and you have more modern mail service, like bringing different types of news to different parts of the country, political news, business-related news, fashion, religious, beliefs kind of being promoted. let's kind of focus on what's happening in the South really quickly, just because I don't want to only focus on the industry of the time. I mentioned earlier that cotton is a big cash crop for the South. It, is actually a very old crop, but there's new opportunities emerging in the late 18th century, early 19th century. The chief difficulty of using cotton or growing cotton was extracting seeds from the crop. But if you're all familiar with the cotton gin, which is something invented by Eli Whitney, this is going to solve this problem. It's going to help to de-seed the cotton crop at a much faster rate. Also, during the early 1800s, there's a growing demand for cotton in Europe. This is going to lead to an economic revolution in the South. Cotton really required less, investment and efforts than rice or indigo or sugar. It doesn't rot, it doesn't get eaten by insects, so it's also light to transport, so you can transport more of it. So cotton production kind of becomes the backbone of the Southern economy overall. Small farmers would pioneer it, but then eventually larger, slave-holding plantations will grow most of what the Southern economy produces. Cotton definitely fuels expansion into new regions, such as like Louisiana, Mississippi. There are many cotton plantations that were established in this neck of the woods. And it plays a key role in economic growth. Slavery, will really be rooted in cotton production. So quite honestly, kind of carrying on kind of economic / political relations into the next unit, because it will make, Southern plantations even more protective of maintaining their slaves. The last thing we'll talk about today is the Erie Canal, which is a canal that cut across New York State in order to connect the Atlantic Ocean at New York City to the Great Lakes. Just because in that Midwestern region there was no, good, effective way to transport goods and resources. You had to first carry things on land to get to a waterway. But this is going to really help trade and economic growth over time. So this is a huge engineering project. A canal is a man-made body of water. And this engineering project was funded entirely by the state of New York. There are no federal dollars going to the Erie Canal. It was one of the world's largest canals at the time, over 363 miles long, eventually completed in the 1820s. Very largely constructed by Irish immigrants. We're going to talk about immigration, labor, throughout the rest of the semester, but this is just one example that, a lot of times construction engineering projects like this would hire immigrants for low wages. When the canal is constructed, you will see cities along it kind of booming. They experience exponential economic growth because of the success, and so much water travel that's taking place. So these are cities you all know today, Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, Buffalo, Albany being the capital, obviously. So they will, prosper with the canal because they'll become so much more heavily visited and traveled. The Erie Canal quickly became a symbol of American economic prosperity and integrity in the U.S. It's a good symbol of our industrial and economic success and change in this era. All right, if y'all have any questions, please write them down, and we will review later.